What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
What did you say, Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
What's up, Rebels? Welcome back to Rebel Radio, the weekly show where I talk to the rebels who are shaping youth culture. We talk about how they do it, why they do it, and what you can do to get a little piece of the pie for yourself. We're also the only show that brings you new music every week from our friends over at EDMcom. And speaking of EDMcom, my guest this week is Ethan Baer. He's the co-founder and the CEO of EDMcom. He runs the website and the label. They also own some of the most popular SoundCloud channels on the service. Really fascinating business, innovative to the music industry. He's going to talk to us about how he built that, what he's learned along the way. And, you know, in his job, he works with hundreds of artists, DJs, producers. He shares some advice for what they should pay attention to starting out. Definitely if you work in the industry or you have friends who are artists trying to make it, they're definitely going to want to hear this one, so share it with them. We'll get into it right after our EDM.com track of the week. So that was the EDM.com track of the week. That's Double Drop with Hey Puppy. If you like that one, get over to EDM.com, check out new music, and let's get into the interview with Ethan Baer, the CEO of EDM.com. Dude, thanks for doing this interview with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm excited. This is impromptu. It's my first interview without notes or
we're
any
gonna
preparation. You know, I always love doing interviews with people that I know because I find out a bunch of stuff I didn't know.
Right. So maybe the no research is a good thing.
Well, and I think you have a fascinating job to be running EDM.com and the label and you know, you've conceived of this, I think, really interesting business model. So I'm excited to kind of talk about how that's happened and why and what you're going to do with it now. And
yeah, I'm excited to talk about it and kind of explore that more.
All right, so take us to the beginning. What was the music? What music really turned you on to music? Do you remember like an early record or something like that?
It was mostly metal.
Yeah.
I really loved death metal, heavy metal.
Okay.
I think.
So you're a kid growing up in Denver.
Yep, kid growing up in Denver.
And what was the first record you bought?
Ooh, the first record I bought. The only record I ever bought was Linkin Park Hybrid Theory.
No way.
Yep.
That's crazy.
Yep.
Okay.
Not that I didn't like music at that time. I just didn't really. I was on the peer-to-peer illegal downloading thing real early. So
okay.
Which is interesting that now I'm doing a label. And, But yeah.
So you bought Hybrid Theory.
Yep, I bought Hybrid Theory. I was in maybe 6th grade. And from that point forward, I knew that I loved music. I remember getting my Sony Walkman and listening to it, sitting in a hotel with my parents, and I went into my room and put on the headphones and didn't come out for a couple hours and listened to the album a couple times through. And from then on, that was, I was definitely a music lover from that time forward.
And you're a kid then, so you're not thinking of music as a career.
No, not at all. I actually never thought of music as a career until it happened.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So what were you going to do for a living?
I was torn. I mean, my ideal job changed very frequently.
Yeah.
The first time I was ever asked what I wanted to do, my mom was trying to kind of show me off to her friends or whatever. And she asked me what I wanted to do. And she's like, do you want to be the president someday? Uh-huh. And I said, why would I want to be the president? I want to be the king of the universe.
Oh, nice. I think Donald Trump wants the same thing.
Yep, I think he does.
Yeah. So how did that happen?
No, it didn't work out.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually decided not to take the job.
I didn't remember.
Yeah.
My American history is a little fuzzy.
Yeah, I was told that it was like a conflict of interest, so I just didn't pursue it.
All right. So King of the Universe, that's cool.
Yeah, and then I wanted to be a doctor
Okay.
because both of my parents are doctors, so I thought that was like what I was supposed to do.
Sure.
And then I wanted to be a lawyer because I felt like it was the opposite. I don't really know if it's the opposite, but I felt like it was.
So wait, so go back to the music for a minute. So so what was your introduction to electronic music?
I think I listened to like some electronic here and there in high school, but my first like real electronic experience was I saw Daft Punk at Red Rocks in 2007, I think. Their Alive 2007 tour. Yeah. And they had their big pyramid that they were famous for, and that was it's a legendary show in Daft Punk history. And that definitely imprinted on me.
Yeah.
From that time forward, I was into electronic music.
Okay, so you're a metalhead, and you end up seeing Daft Punk.
Yep.
Which is not very metal.
Nope.
And what happens?
It was just so different, and seeing like the scene was so incredibly different, but very enticing to me. Yeah. I was at that point the only concerts I had been to were metal shows, and I really enjoyed them a lot, but it always seemed to me that kind of like the purpose of a lot of people being at those shows was more to like get out aggression and be in the mosh pit and kind of shove people around.
For sure.
And I loved that. That was real fun at the time, and like getting like rough with people and getting out some of that energy. Like I enjoyed that. Yeah. But being at that Daft Punk show was a very different experience. And I'm sure. There were so many like super hardcore fans there, and it was really, I felt like it was one of the first times I was at a show where it was just about the music, and everyone was so excited to be there for the music and for that show and for Daft Punk. Yeah. Which was really cool. It was just much more laid back and more of a party than like a brawl. Sure. For obvious reasons.
Totally. It's funny though. I mean, I'm not a metal guy, but I've been to, I've been in a few mosh pits in my life. Yeah. And I
got caught in one on New Year's.
Oh, really?
Yeah, this last year. New Year's? This year, yeah. I went to a show.
You're getting a little old to be.
I know. Okay. I actually have been limping for the last 3 weeks. I thought I broke my foot. It's just a very slight, just a sprain. Yeah. But I was at Bro Safari and Zed's Dead and a couple other people at a show in New York. And I went with a couple girls and some of my friends. And a mosh pit just started in the middle of Bro Safari, and like, wow. I was trying to keep it away from the people that I was with, so I was kind of like the blockade between my friends and the mosh pit. Yeah. And some guy just slammed into me, and then as I'm kind of stumbling backwards, another dude stomps on my foot, not on purpose, but he's getting bumped around too. Sure. And then for the next like couple weeks, I'm like limping and whatever. So I'm too old for the mosh pit.
That's a young man's game for sure.
Yeah.
But I was going to say, like, having, it's a totally different experience. And it is a huge release of energy. And just that, I mean, it's a really unique type of show. Yeah.
I also just kind of, I got to a point where I was, like, really concerned about my hearing. In electronic music, I mean, it can be really loud, and the shows are, probably almost as damaging, but metal shows were pretty brutal on my ears, and at that point I wasn't wearing earplugs. And of course. So at that point I kind of started to realize I should probably protect my ears if I want to continue enjoying music.
Yeah, absolutely. So how does this how do you start to get involved in the business of it?
Yeah, so in college, my roommate freshman year was really into electronic music. Daft Punk, Rat-a-Tat, Justice released their first album around then. And that was what he played all the time. So I got really into it because it was kind of like our bonding experience with your new roommate. Yeah. And then as I kind of went through college, it was just what was popular. Everyone at my school, was really into Hype Machine at the time. Okay. And it was electronic music was very.
Is that still around?
Yeah, Hype Machine's still around, but it doesn't have nearly the it doesn't have nearly the clout that it did back then. I mean,
Yeah,
the music scene was just so different. You
Yeah.
know, everything was based around downloads.
Yeah.
So you would have to
Blogs.
discover the music somewhere
Right.
and then go and download it. And Hype Machine was like a very central discovery platform.
Yeah.
And a lot of the electronic music I listened to at that time wasn't so much artists putting out a lot of original content, but it was a lot of remixes.
Right.
Hype Machine in particular was a lot of remixes. So I discovered, early Deadmau5, Justice, Boys Noise, Crystal Castles, kind of some of the electro type stuff. And Hype Machine was like a very central part of me kind of discovering a lot of the artists that would take me into being excited about dance music.
Yeah.
I was really into the blog scene too back then,
Yeah.
which all of that has so much less influence now with all the streaming platforms that really kind of curate the taste that people end up.
It does, but it's weird. I mean, I feel like it was an important kind of step
Oh yeah.
to where we've gotten, right? Because, before that, it was this very like, you had this sort of professional class of music, whether they're DJs or radio or magazines, right? You had these people that are like, I mean, I was part of that, and a lot of us were just kids kind of doing our thing, but there was this still sort of like division between the industry or the editorial side and the listeners.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, very
and
much
even
so.
if you were a journalist that was working for free, somebody was still picking up your article and deciding to publish it and all of that. And then the blog thing just changed all of that because anybody could create a blog.
Right. The fans became the critics in a
Absolutely.
sense. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And the curators and whatever
Yeah.
else.
And now we've gotten this sort of back or this kind of middle ground, like with the
Right.
playlists and I mean, DJs are obviously still important,
Right.
but so okay, we're jumping ahead though, but so how did you get involved? What was
Yeah, so freshman
how did you kind of find your way into the music business?
Yeah, freshman and sophomore year, I was just really immersed in it because my friend group had really kind of bonded over
Yeah.
electronic music.
Yeah.
I learned to do poi. I don't know if you know what poi are, but
No.
they're
It's like a tarot,
yeah. So they're like
like a
there's
Hawaiian
two forms.
dish?
There's two primary forms of poi. There's like the glow up light ones, and they're basically glowing balls attached to a chain, and you do kind of
oh shit, okay,
yeah. So you kind of twirl them around
like
and
glow
do
stick.
glow sticks on chains,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah. I've
So I
seen
did
it.
that for
I
a
didn't know
while.
that was a name.
Yeah, I did that for a while, and that was cool. And then eventually, I wanted to one up it. So my friend Josh and I started doing fire poi.
Oh shit.
So that's where they're these Kevlar mesh balls still attached to the chains, and you pour gasoline on them and light them on fire,
Wow.
and then spin them around.
Okay.
And so I got real good at that, and that was
Okay.
kind of like my rave thing.
All right.
So that was like starting to get more into electronic music, and then junior year, I started DJing,
Yeah.
and that was when I got real into it.
And what was the first gig?
It was pretty much I played a couple like house parties and stuff, but it was almost always college
Yeah.
stuff on my college campus. I didn't play any like paid gigs or anything. I played one show for an artist, one set at a legit venue for an artist that I was loosely managing at a time, and I did direct support for him, which was cool. It was fun to play for like an audience that wasn't people that I knew.
Yeah.
But it was mostly college. And I didn't do it because I wanted to make money as a DJ or I wanted to be an
Right.
artist. I did it mostly because I became known amongst my friends as the guy who was always looking for new music. I like ravenously consumed new music and was always looking for the new thing. And I just wanted a way to share that with my friends. So I started DJing just to do that and get the music out there. I played at a couple of like the Battle of the Bands at my school, which didn't really make sense, but it was fun.
Sure.
And eventually like, some of my friends asked me to share some of the music with them, send them playlists, like make them mixtapes or whatever. And so I started a blog called Subsynthesis.
Okay.
And yeah, it just started really organically. The music that I would play in my sets, I'd upload it to the site and write some commentary on it, talk about why I liked it. And I was just really into talking to the artists and getting to know them and understanding the story behind the music. And I love sharing that. And part of meeting a lot of these artists and kind of digging for the story led to a lot of the artists really heavily supporting me or supporting the platform.
Yeah.
And one of the artists, Nick Grit, this guy, Danny Beal, I just loved his music.
So do you remember a moment when you decided that this was like your career path? Did it happen that way?
Yeah. I think the moment that I decided it was something that I wanted to pursue was I had enough money saved up that I could kind of take a little bit of time off after college. So I moved in with one of my friends in Boulder, and I kind of just I wanted to just take a little time to figure out what I wanted to do. And during that time, I ran the blog because I was still, kind of phased with me after college. And it just kept getting more and more traffic and generating more revenue. And, obviously it wasn't a tremendous amount of money. It was just a personal blog. But it was enough that I could pay some of my bills. And I realized this is really fun. Yeah, this is really fun. It's something that I can get really excited about. And at that time, I was still really considering going to law school. But I figured, I'd rather take a year off before I commit to more education. And so I committed to doing it for that year. And it just, in that time, it took off to the point where I kept with it.
So if you were talking to college students today, I don't know if you do that.
Sometimes.
What would you tell them? What should they do that you did? And what should they not do that you did?
I actually have a conversation that's somewhat related to this with my roommates pretty often, with a lot of people pretty often, that I wish that college happened 3 years later than it did in just your life cycle. Yeah. Because I feel like a lot of the things that I got out of college, if I had been a little bit older and a little bit more mature, I would have kind of gotten a lot more out of it.
Yeah.
So it's just that you only have those 4 years to get that college experience. And education is such an amazing thing if you put in what you want to get out. Yeah. And I feel like I could have done that more. And a couple years of additional time could have made that difference for me. Sure. But it's more just about the mentality. If I could give some advice, it would be, this is a really valuable time in education. Even just learning to love learning. Yeah. Not necessarily any of the material that you learn or facts or memorization, but learning to be excited about learning new things is something that's so valuable throughout life. Because I feel like when you stop learning, you start dying.
That's good.
Yeah. So if there was one thing that I guess I could impart is learn to love learning, because it's something that will be valuable the rest of your life.
So, okay, so you're doing the blog, and then I know, you get involved in EDMcom. Was there a break where you guys broke through and everything became easier?
So it wasn't EDM.com initially. Right. It was it went from Subsynthesis to Dubstep.net.
Yeah.
And then from Dubstep.net to House.net, Electro.net, Drumandbass.net. So a lot of different electronic genres. .net. So it was the .net network. And eventually the EDM network. And I can't name a specific point where it was okay, we've made it. Everything's gonna be downhill from here, downhill in terms of being easier. I guess that wasn't really not the best way to explain it. But I think the first time to me that it seemed like things were really happening was SoundCloud. When you're on SoundCloud, you can see your total stats. So how many people have listened to your songs and how many different users have listened. And we broke 10 million. Total listens on our SoundCloud account for Dubstep.net.
Yeah.
And that just seemed so huge to me. I mean, and it is huge. Obviously, in this kind of culture, we see all these huge numbers on Spotify and YouTube, and they're talking about, the first track broke 1 billion streams, and so people are a little bit, I feel, so inundated with big numbers that you kind of are numb to some of it sometimes. But for me, breaking 10 million was like a huge milestone. And I remember sharing a screenshot of that with all my friends and sending it to my parents. And that was a very meaningful moment to me.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. The problem with that, though, is if you're only featuring basically illegal music,
Sure.
You can't make any money off of that.
Right.
It's cool, and they're big numbers, and you can put it on your fridge, get a magnet or something,
Yeah.
but it doesn't mean much.
Yeah, I get it.
Right. So,
No, I just wanted like that perspective of like 10 million.
yeah.
And kind of where that goes.
Yeah, so...
And when do other people start noticing what you guys had?
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting question. So I would probably break that into a very interesting turning point for us. And that was early on, getting music to feature on the network was always a matter of reaching out to artists.
Yeah.
So even though we were featuring a lot of bootlegs and, music with uncleared samples and, as I said before, illegal music, even though we were doing that, it was very important for the artist to say that they were okay with us featuring it.
Yeah.
We wanted the artist to be excited and to support it. So at the beginning, it was always me reaching out to these artists. Always. I would spend all day looking for new songs and trying to find stuff that I thought was a fit for our platform. And then at the end of every day, I'd reach out to like 50 people. And then we'd get, 5 responses. And those would be the songs we'd feature the next day. And at some point, that switched. And so many people were reaching out to me that I didn't have much time to reach out to artists anymore. And I guess I would say that's kind of the turning point where the phone started ringing, so to speak.
Yeah.
At that point, it was just artists. And they were mostly small artists that saw what we were doing and wanted support for their music. In terms of the phone ringing on a more kind of business level of people wanting to work with us, I would say that really happened when we purchased EDM.com. Maybe there was some before that, but that was a big turning point because the term EDM was becoming very big at the time.
Yeah.
I think we launched EDM.com on January 1st, 2013.
Okay.
And so that was kind of right at the peak.
Yeah.
Peak or the beginning of the peak.
Yeah.
It lasted a couple years of being that term being really strong.
Sure.
And that really we referred to it as the calling card. As soon as that website was up, from then on, like the phones were ringing.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it's an interesting bit of like real estate arbitrage, isn't it?
Yeah,
very
much so.
You guys had like a cool thing going. You had the opportunity to get this domain name, right? And that was obviously a really smart move to pick that up.
Yeah, it's actually an interesting story. Just a little aside. But we realized EDM was going to be the thing.
Yeah.
The term became enough of a buzzword that it was clear that was where the industry was going. So my partner at the time looked up EDM.com, just kind of on a whim, like, oh, I wonder if we can get this. And it was listed as available for purchase by owner. So not like something you can just get on GoDaddy for $9.99, but someone was trying to sell it.
You gotta like make a deal.
Yeah, exactly. Let's make a deal. So over a period of a couple weeks, my partner got in contact with him, and it turned out that the guy had purchased the domain in 1995, I believe. And at the time, the guy said there was kind of like a little bit of a superstition that you were only supposed to purchase one domain name.
Oh, wow.
And he had the choice between EDM.com and golf.com. And he chose EDM.com because he was an engineer by trade, and his specific area of expertise was what's called electronic discharge machining. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but that was his...
He should have gone with golf.com.
I agree.
So, it's interesting now talking about this in 2018 because EDM is not... as you said, it has passed its peak as a term and as a genre. And I know, musicians tend to kind of hate these buzzwords as soon as they become popular and they want to like retreat from all that.
Right. They like them while it's contributing to their success.
Yeah, for sure.
And then at some point, everyone pushes back against it when it becomes too popular.
Of course. Yeah.
The genre tangent's a good tangent. That's like an ongoing conversation for sure.
It's a hard thing because there's value to it, and at the same time, I understand artists don't want to be pigeonholed.
It's very different from the artist perspective and the consumer perspective, and that's where I feel like that's where the tension of over the genre topic comes in, because artists don't want to be pigeonholed, but fans want to be able to find what they're looking for.
Right. But, I think that not wanting to be pigeonholed is a mistake.
I agree.
It's counterproductive for what they're trying to do. And, I've had this discussion that, one of the biggest mistakes that artists make is they try to evolve at a pace that's faster than their fans are keeping up with. And, I understand because I've been on the artist side, or I've seen what artists go through when, by the time you put a single out, you've played that song 1,000 times, right? Because you wrote it, you recorded it, you rehearsed it, you promoted it, you've done all these things, and you're sick of that record.
Right.
There's no chance that you're not sick of that record.
Yeah, I think that's true for most artists. By the time you put something out, you already hate it.
And then, God forbid, it becomes a hit. Then you got to play it another 10,000
Right.
times, right? Or hear it and hear people talk about it.
Maybe for the rest of your career.
Maybe, right? Yeah. I mean, there's guys that are, 40 years since they made that record and they're still playing it on, New Year's Eve or whatever.
It's like when we saw Guns N' Roses at Coachella a couple years ago.
For
and they're
sure.
playing the songs from, 20, 30 years before.
That's exactly right. And so, of course, they're sick of it. But that's what gives them a career that, takes them into their later years. And so they always want to evolve because they're so close to the material. And for them, that's old. And they, not Guns N' Roses, right? But you have a song that's working. For you, it's already old, and you're trying to move on to the next thing. Your fans are just discovering that,
right?
And they're not ready for the next thing.
Again, I think it comes down to almost the same thing as genres. It's just the artist perspective is so much different than the fan consumer perspective. And you got to find a middle ground there, because if as an artist, you're kind of just curating to your own taste or making music to your own taste, there's always going to be that disconnect with the fans. So I agree. That's a very common problem is artists get so bombarded by their own style and their own sound. That's all they hear.
Sure.
And so they feel like it must be old to everyone else too.
Yeah.
But it's like other people aren't there listening to the snare 1,000 times while you're making the song.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think another kind of theme, another thing that follows that same theme is the idea of selling out or being too mainstream, where a lot of artists, a lot of people in general really look at the idea of selling out as the worst thing ever. Like that's the end of your career.
Is that still, I mean, I know you talk to a lot more artists than I do. Is that still the case?
Still the case.
Yeah.
We work, as a record label, we work with a lot of emerging talent. So a lot of very new early stage artists. Which is, it's really exciting because you get to see them kind of evolve from the beginning of their career.
Yeah.
A very common theme is hatred of the idea of selling out or being mainstream. Early artists really love the idea of being counterculture.
What does that mean in 2018? What does it mean to sell out?
I don't think it really means much of anything, personally.
But what do you think it means to these artists?
It's interesting because these artists want to be successful, right? Because they're pursuing music as a career. But to them, selling out, when you try and kind of draw out of them what it means, it mostly comes down to being successful with your music. Really, their kind of mental thing. Yeah, their mental kind of picture of it is selling out means making the music the fans want instead of the music you want. Which, I do get that. And if you're totally compromising your own creative voice just to cater to what you think people want, yes, that's absolutely a mistake. If you're just making what people tell you to make, that could definitely be a mistake. Not necessarily, but I can see that not being creatively fulfilling.
Yeah.
But I think the misconception here is that there isn't a middle ground.
Right.
Like, it doesn't have to be you make what you want or you make what the fans want. It's
Yeah.
how about you make what excites you that fans will like. And it doesn't have to be this crazy extreme either way. But I've found it's very common for artists to push back against the idea of selling out. But when you try and really get an explanation of it, it ultimately comes down to, oh, they're selling records. They're selling music, so they must have sold out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really difficult road to navigate,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? Like, I think, there are definitely, because, our egos are so much in control of that whole discussion, right? Like, there's definitely artists that are so much up their own ass that they're making stuff they like, and they're the only ones that like it.
Yes, for sure.
And the flip side is, just chasing what fans want. You mentioned Linkin Park. So, Chester said to me the first time I met him, he said, if we made the records that the fans wanted, we would just re-record Hybrid Theory over and over.
Right.
Because that's what they want. That record sold 20 million.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate
27
that.
million copies, right? Yeah. And probably a big chunk of their ticket sales are people wanting to hear those songs, right? And so that's great. That's a blessing to find yourself in that position. The flip side is, if you're trying to continue making music, you have to evolve.
Right. It's not creatively fulfilling to re-record the same song over and over again.
Right. Exactly. And you're not adding anything to enrich your fans.
Right.
Right. So there's also that kind of like, people like to attribute it to Steve Jobs, right? That people don't know what they want until you give it to them.
Right.
And so it's 100% about finding the right balance, and the right, I think the artists that have succeeded over time are the ones that somehow innately have figured out how quickly to grow.
Mm-hmm. I've actually heard a really good quote about that. I'm trying to remember who I heard it from. It was someone that I've worked with along the way, and I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of having to find a middle ground between educating and accommodating.
Yeah.
And kind of the simple explanation of that is, by accommodating, you're creating music that is accessible.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that people will want to listen to. You're keeping your fans in mind. You're making something that, within the social scene that you're making music with, or just the musical scene that's currently, prevalent at the time, you're making music that is somewhat accommodating to the fans that you want to reach.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you have to educate, meaning if you're just accommodating, that's not creatively fulfilling. So the educating part is exposing people to what you like, even if it might not be what they've heard before or what they think they like at the time. So there's a mix, you have to pursue what you want to do, even if it's very different, but at the same time, you have to make sure that it's something that people will want to listen to. And that is a tough balance.
It is. And it's funny, like, you think about all these copyright cases that are happening now, if I played you something that's unlike anything you heard before, you would hate it.
Often, yes.
That's our nature, is
Yeah.
we like what's familiar to us. So
We like what we're comfortable with.
Yeah. So take me back. So, you have this site that's doing really well. We were talking earlier at dinner about maybe the futility of record labels to some extent. So why create a label?
I guess it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, where we got to a point where the company was generating 100 million listens to the music that we are featuring every month.
Yeah.
But we realized that wasn't really a business. It was like a really cool thing that was helping a lot of artists, but it made no money, which is clearly not a sustainable business model there. So kind of the realization that we had is the money in that business or in that space is in owning the content. So the transition happened very slowly. It wasn't an immediate thing where we just stopped featuring other people's music and started, releasing music as a record label. But we made it our goal to start signing some of the music that we were featuring so that some of those 100 million plays a month were going to content that we owned. So actually leveraging our media platform to promote our own content.
Yeah.
So at the beginning, it was a mix of using, remixes and very mainstream content to bring a lot of traffic to the platform, mixed in with songs that we owned.
Right.
And it slowly transitioned into only featuring music that our label owned. And this is where I said the peak of our traffic was 100 million plays a month. When we switched to a record label, we couldn't feature the sheer volume of content that we are featuring as just a promotion platform, because you can find 100 songs a week from random artists and upload them to your channel.
Sure.
But going through the signing and the contracting and the A&R process and distributing it to retail, going through all of that, you can't do nearly the volume that you can when there's no real business behind it.
Right.
So the plays went down considerably to, again, it was gradual because we slowly phased into doing only label content. But I think it ended up plateauing around 30 million views per month.
I mean, it's still a lot.
Still a lot.
Yeah.
It's definitely still a lot. But all of those plays, all 30 million of those plays, was on music that we owned.
Right.
And obviously the difference, 100 million plays is really impressive, but it generated $0.
Right.
30 million plays is, less than half, but it generates literally infinitely more money because 0 is nothing.
Sure. Yeah.
So that was, it really was just a realization that this is really cool and we have something here and these platforms are strong, but how can we actually make money with them?
Yeah. So, you call yourself a label, but it's a different model than a typical label, right? So I don't know, a DIMAC or a Fool's Gold, I don't know how many releases they put out. 20, 50 releases a year or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know exactly. I would say they put out probably 10 to 15 a month.
Okay.
They do it. It's a good amount, but
so 100, 150 a year.
Yeah, probably something like that.
And you?
Right now, obviously it took a while to ramp up, but right now we put out about 100 records a month. Yeah, so it's a very, very different from the standard record label model.
Yeah, so explain the model.
Sure. So I mentioned earlier there was a turning point where I used to do all of the outreach to artists.
Yeah.
And it sort of transitioned to suddenly the artists would always be reaching out to us, wanting us to feature their music on the platform.
Yeah.
And we realized at one point that we really had something there. So we created what we call the submission portal. And basically artists log in using their email and they have to fill out basic information, their name and their date of birth and where they're from and what types of music that they like, what they produce, do they play live, are they signed to a label? So kind of basic information that you might want about these people. And that's done two things. It's probably done a lot more than two things, but there's two things that were really intentional. One of them was we wanted to continue supporting as many up-and-coming artists as possible. And the other was the music business and the record business is very hit or miss and oftentimes very unpredictable. You think you have the best hit in the world and no one gives a shit.
Right.
And you think you have a piece of junk that you're putting out just because the artist really loves it. And you're like, all right, whatever, we'll put this one out. And it gets millions of plays in the first month. So by doing a bulk model and putting out a ton of content, it's kind of like rolling the dice 100 times. If you roll it enough times, you'll get big tracks.
Sure.
It's done a couple things. It's really, we've been able to work with so many talented people.
Yeah.
And it's also a really good way of hedging your bets.
Sure. So what are some of the big tracks or big artists that have started?
Sure. Yeah. There aren't any big pop star artists that we've worked with because, we do have that focus on emerging talent.
Yeah.
But we worked with this one artist, Fam, who is from Poland. I think he was 18 at the time we signed the first track. It's a track called Movements. and it got featured on a big YouTube channel and got a lot of plays from that. I think that upload has like 40 million streams now. The SoundCloud upload got like 23 million streams. The Spotify upload has around 30 million streams, and it was just a I don't like to say random in an insulting way, but it was just a random submission from a kid in Poland who now has a career.
Wow.
So that's one. Pham, Pham.
Yeah.
Another one is this artist named Scrux.
Okay.
And he did a track called You and Me, which really took off on SoundCloud and ended up driving a lot of traffic to Spotify. That track still does well every month. We did another track called Deep End by the vocalist on it is a girl named Lexi Pantera. And she got famous doing twerk videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
And she has a company, I think, called Twerk Out.
Okay.
And she gives like twerking. It's like an exercise aerobics kind of idea, but she gives twerk lessons to girls in LA, and travels around the country and does like twerk workshops. It's more of like a dance class at this point.
Twerk shops.
Yeah, twerk shops, exactly. So she was the vocalist on that, and that track did really well. Obviously, she has a very big YouTube following, so she was able to support it. But that was one of our more, I would say, creative marketing strategies around that release. Because Lexi is a dancer, we decided to reach out to a bunch of other dancers to create little dance routines to the song. And we ended up getting a bunch of really big Instagram dancers, YouTube dancers to make videos for the song, and they all did really well. So that created kind of a lot of organic groundswell around that track.
I bet. So talk about, we were kind of talking about this at dinner, but, you go from kind of this labor of love to now running a company, leading a team, people that rely on you and, it very much like me, like I never set out to run a company and I had no training in that.
Right.
But, sometimes when you're good at something, you end up with a company that does it, and you have to kind of figure that out as you go.
Yeah.
Now let me think of the question.
Okay.
I don't know, like how. What's the hardest part of that transition? And what's the best part of it?
The hardest part, that's a tough question. There's a lot of hard parts.
Yeah.
I would say the hardest part for me was at the beginning, there wasn't really being a boss or being a leader, so to speak, because it was just me, and then eventually it was just me and one partner, and we were equals. So there wasn't any, you're leading or I'm leading.
Right.
And then as we brought on more people, my partner definitely had he was more interested in being a leader at the time. And he was older as well and had a bit more experience. So he really took on the leadership role. And I thought of myself as the person that would just work harder than anyone else. And I wanted to just be as productive as humanly possible. So I was very focused on the task at hand and how much I could get done in a day and just really immerse myself in the work. And in the last year or so, I've had to take on a leadership role. And it's funny because a lot of the employees that I've talked to about this have been like, well, we always felt like you were in a leadership role. Like you've played a huge part in inspiring us and like creating kind of the vision for the company. And I definitely never thought of myself in that way. That just sort of, I guess, bled off from my passion for what we were doing.
What do you think they saw that you didn't in you?
I think a lot of it came down to just my passion and my perseverance and my focus on the goal. Like I had a vision and I really wanted to achieve it and I pursued it relentlessly. And I think while I may not have been thinking about leading people to do the same, I was creating a model that they could follow and sort of leading through example without knowing that I was leading, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that I think was what they saw. In terms of the hard part, what's hard for me is just kind of the transition from getting my gratification out of feeling like I'm producing the most work and being the producer and the doer to having to some degree step back from that and not necessarily be so concerned about the one that's doing the most work and really be focused on motivating the team and creating the right culture and the right environment for them to work in and making sure that everyone is focused on the right things and that I'm removing obstacles from their path so that they can accomplish what they need to accomplish. And that shift was really difficult and is very difficult for me because a lot of my, I guess, self-esteem and self-worth for me came from knowing how much I was accomplishing. And I know that I'm not necessarily like accomplishing is sort of a mixed word. You know, leadership is accomplishing something in just as much of a way. But my self-worth to me was very much based on how much I got done. And I prided myself on being very productive. And it's just a very different, leadership is a very different type of productivity. So that transition was and is very difficult for me.
Yeah, I think it should be. I think it's, I mean, everyone I know, we're in an interesting business where if you're good at what you do, you end up not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the reality. And it's not like, I don't think it's like that in every industry. But that's what happens, right?
Yeah.
As you build it, you end up with a company and then you're left with running a company and leading a team and all that stuff.
If you're good at what you do and you love it, then and it becomes successful, then eventually you have to be the one that's helping other people continue that.
Yeah, which is a completely different skill set.
Absolutely.
Than whatever it is you were doing, and there's I think a lot of conflict in that process of transitioning from one to the other.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder, do you think we're approaching a time when a computer can pick a hit record?
Yeah, I think a computer could pick a hit record. I've actually I've seen a lot of really interesting technology that's kind of working in that direction. I saw this one app or program that's in development. Some people I know are working on this as kind of a business project that they were developing. And they're both songwriters. Yeah. And the idea of the software is they ran hundreds of pop hits through this software and tried to map the nuances of the melody and the chord structure and the vocals, and essentially it creates a model that a hit record could fall into, right? And there's producers like Max Martin and Dr. Luke and these big hit producers that are known for making dozens or hundreds of hit records. Yeah. And there's a formula. Yeah. There's a formula for them to be able to do that. And the formula doesn't mean, it's exactly this and this and this, but there's a very distinct pattern that if you follow it, it's catchy, it's relatable, people can, hum along to it or sing the hook or whatever. And just looking at their software and how it mapped out like the attenuation of a song, it's definitely doable.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think, there's a lot of songs that are important over the years that wouldn't have got picked as hits.
I'm sure, yeah. I mean, you hear that story from artists all the time where it's like that one song that they didn't want to release and they're like, they put it on the back burn for years and whatever, their manager pressures them to release it or their label is like, yo, you still got one song in your contract. We got to put something out. Sure. And they put out that one random song they had been sitting on because they didn't really think it was that special. And that's the biggest song of their career. Totally. That makes their career.
Totally.
So that,
or it was on the B-side.
Right, exactly.
Or,
there's an album with a bunch of huge singles.
I'm not a Bob Dylan fan, but like who would have ever thought that guy was going to make hit records?
Right. I still don't understand that, to be
Yeah,
honest.
like he can't. No, but I mean, as I was saying, like the dude can't sing,
Right.
and whatever. But
I've gotten a lot of hate for saying that, but it's definitely true.
Really? Oh, I thought that was common.
I thought so too.
But there's a lot of artists like that are not. They don't fit the mold
Right.
of whatever is the perfect artist of the day. Certainly, with electronic music in the early days, no one would have thought that like these instrumental songs
Right. Yeah.
right would mean anything, right? Like, so I think there's a lot of that computers aren't going to get.
Right. The evolution of genres
Yeah,
is hard
for
to
sure.
predict. Yeah.
For sure. I know we were talking about it earlier and how, the resistance to that, for me and my generation and before, like genre had all these other important meanings, like, they kind of helped kids. I think in high school, they helped kids like organize their lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So the rockers dressed in
And
a
your
certain
friend
way.
groups and
Yeah, your friends, your style of clothing, your slang that you use, like most of that was driven by music.
Mm-hmm. I think it kind of goes both ways. In some ways, your personality and who you hung out with determined what you listened to. And then on the flip
Yes.
side, the type of music that you listened to often played a role in determining who you hung out with and how you dressed. So I
For
think
sure.
it goes both ways.
Yeah, it does. No question.
Music was a large factor in determining that.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And certainly there's some jumping of genres. I did that, a few times in my life, and it took me a certain level of maturity to be able to accept all of the different styles of music that I like at the same time. And now that's become, open format has become more
Right.
like acceptable as a way to be. But I guess what I'm saying is like, yeah, so that became kind of an organizing force, right? That you could make a lot of other decisions in your life around
Right.
your musical taste. That seems to have gone away.
Yeah, I think in some ways it has, and in some ways it hasn't. I think because open format is so much more acceptable at this point, that's played a pretty big role in making it so that it's not as segmented or as fragmented. Where most people are more accepting of what I hear more often now is I like everything but this,
Right.
as opposed to I identify as a rocker or I
Sure.
identify as a metalhead. It's more I like everything except country, or I like everything except electronic music or whatever.
So if you're a young person today, how are you supposed to know how to dress?
I don't know.
like you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
how do you know if you can't use your music genre to tell you kind of what person you are? How do you know who you are?
I think it still largely has to do with music.
Does it?
I just think it's not as fragmented as I said before, and I think
Okay.
I think also there's less different groups,
Yeah.
and it's definitely more common for one kind of umbrella genre to be relevant for a much bigger population of a certain age group. So I definitely have a lot of friends, younger siblings who they dress like all the other people at the music festivals they go to. So music festivals and concerts still play a huge role in determining
Sure.
a lot of different cultural trends.
Yeah.
I just think it's less fragmented.
Sounds confusing.
Yeah,
Sounds like
I don't know how I would figure out how to
sounds like
dress
I wouldn't
if I
know
was
who
a
to
kid
hate.
now.
If I were in high school today.
Yeah. I think maybe now you have to hang out with and dress like the other people that listen to the same Spotify playlists.
Oh man, that sounds crazy. All right, well, I got to do a lightning round.
Okay.
So tell me one decision that changed your life forever.
Oh, wow. I think just pursuing music in the first place really changed my life forever, because I had all these different, like, very specific, extended education career paths in mind that I really wanted to do, but I decided to wing it for a year, and that decision ended up, now it's 2018 now, 7 years later, I'm still doing that thing that I just decided, hey, I'm just gonna give it a shot.
Yeah.
So that was a really big turning point for me.
Yeah.
And that was also where I kind of rejected what was expected of me and decided to just do what I was having fun doing.
Was that a difficult choice?
It was difficult at the time internally, because I thought it would be something that my parents would reject. And, I was always, success, particularly financial success, was always something that seemed very important to me. Because I had grown up in a family that was relatively affluent and had a lot of privileges, and growing up around that and going to private schools and having all of my friends be, well off, it was almost expected. And I had that expectation for myself. And I thought that by rejecting, being a doctor or being a lawyer, or kind of the things that were expected of me, I thought that my parents in particular, I thought they would not be interested in that, and would be disappointed. But they were, after I made the decision and I told them about it, they were incredibly supportive. So it was hard. It was very hard to make that decision. But after I did it and committed myself to it, everyone was really stoked on it. So it was more hard internally than it was for anyone else. But it was hard internally because of what I thought other people would think.
Yeah, that's a good lesson.
Yeah, definitely. Do it for you, not for other people.
Totally. All right, complete this sentence for yourself. I don't have talent. I have blank.
Passion and vision.
If I worked for you, what's something I would hear you say over and over?
What are you working on right now?
Okay. Good. Who would you be excited to learn as a fan of your work?
Bernie Sanders
Okay.
or Elon Musk.
Wow. Elon Musk, I think, is into electronic music.
I think so, yeah.
Bernie,
Probably not.
maybe not so much.
I'd love to go to a concert with Bernie Sanders, though.
I saw him at Coachella.
Oh, really?
On screen with Run the Jewels.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
I
That's
totally
the year we
forgot
were there
about
together.
that. Yeah.
What's your favorite city to travel to?
Probably LA right now, just because I have so many friends here and
Nice.
a lot of people that I really look up to, and it's just a great community, I would say.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about the city, it's about the people.
Yeah. Plus, the rest of the world is under snow right now. So
Yeah, that's true. I live in New York right now, and we got hit with that bomb cyclone. I think it's a bit of an extreme name, but it was pretty intense.
You should put a record out called Bomb Cyclone.
Right? Yeah.
It's a good name.
It's like that song by Dubs, and I forgot who else. They put out that song called Tsunami.
Oh,
And that was real big for like a year.
Yeah. That's right.
Bomb Cyclone's cooler than Tsunami,
Bomb
though, I think.
Cyclone's coming. What's the last great book you read?
I read a book called Principles by Ray Dalio,
Okay.
and that was really good. And then The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Oh, yeah. Is that
That's
good?
an amazing book. Yeah, it's really
I
good.
haven't read it
So
yet,
many
but-
like little funny anecdotes that sometimes I'm a little bit skeptical about kind of, I don't want to call it a self-help book, but sort of those like kind
Yeah.
of inspirational, motivational
Sure.
type of books. But it mixed in so many like good, really funny, culturally relevant anecdotes that it made it like a really easy read. And sometimes
Right.
that genre can be like, I don't want to say a drudge, but it can be work getting through some of it. That one
sure.
was very easy. I got through it in a couple days, and I ended up rereading it. So
It's funny. I just read an article about that book, or about how like the zeitgeist today is very much about self-improvement, right? That you have, Tim Ferriss and, everyone from Tim Ferriss to Deepak Chopra to,
Right.
Every expert trying to tell you how to be better and happier and more successful and whatever. And then there's this sort of subgenre, and I mentioned that book and the life-changing magic of not giving a fuck. There's like a few of those.
yeah.
Like that are just kind of like rebelling against that notion.
Yeah. I like both.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think there's something to be said for improving and also not taking it too seriously.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think
Yeah.
it's like everything. There's definitely is an important balance to be found there.
Yeah.
I think that whole genre of kind of like self-help and like online gurus and like to some degree, I think it's like people really wanting to improve themselves. And in other ways, I think it's like a pretty exploitative industry where,
Oh, for sure.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
preying on people's insecurities and weaknesses.
Absolutely.
And kind of promising snake oil kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because in some ways that's kind of what this show is about, right? Like, I wanted people to learn from people that are building really interesting careers and creative careers and living creative lives. And, it's certainly not, I don't know if I would call it self-help. I think it's mostly meant to be entertaining, but I want people to take something away from it that they can use. At the same time, I've learned, now having done close to 150 episodes, that there is no formula. And, sometimes people ask me, like, what have you learned in doing all these shows? And the number one thing is that, like, what works for you works for you. And what worked for the last guest, maybe in some cases the opposite. And there's some overlaps for sure. There are some common threads from time to time, but it's so individual because you're a unique person and you have to find the path that works for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, picking up someone's book, like it's never going to be a perfect fit. There might be some couple nuggets you can get from it.
Right.
But yeah, it can easily be exploitative if you're sort of, searching for the answer.
Yeah, the more hyper specific that stuff is of this is how you have to do it and here's the exact steps that you have to follow, the more specific and precise it is, generally, the more skeptical I am.
Sure.
Not in that it doesn't work, but that it's kind of hard for a very specific formula to work for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
at the same time, it's like I've read plenty of books that like help you understand the problem, but don't tell you what to do.
Sure.
And
yeah, I guess the
like,
topic is very important too, because some things, a specific formula would be the right way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard. I mean, as somebody who's like, I feel like I'm on a lifelong quest to figure it out for
What's
myself. Whatever it is, I'm trying to figure it out for myself. You know what I mean?
How's that going?
I'm not done. How's it? It's frustrating.
Yeah.
Because you try a lot of shit that doesn't work and some things do, and you're constantly reshuffling the deck. It's actually not frustrating. It's actually really engaging and interesting. But, my wife says it's exhausting, and I get where she's coming from.
Yeah. That reminds me a little bit of something we were talking about earlier, where you were asking me about the transition from, the person doing the day-to-day work to being a leader. That was an instance of it changing, and reshuffling the deck. And you asked me what were like some of the hard things and the easy things, and we ended up getting a little bit off topic. But another one of the hard things is I was very passionate that about finding new music and discovering new artists and really being deeply involved with the artists. That's how I went from being a DJ and running my own blog to starting this company.
Right.
And when I had to transition out of doing that into more of a leadership role, I was no longer doing the thing that I was incredibly passionate about that had gotten me into working in music in the first place.
Sure.
And I think that's to some degree something that I still struggle with a lot, is maintaining that passion and that excitement.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's very important because it is a strong part of my leadership style that I'm trying to develop, is leading by example and showing that passion, and that passion being a large motivational and inspiring force for my team. So maintaining passion and allowing your passion to adapt is something that's really difficult.
It's a tough one. I mean, I think that there is only leadership by example. That's the only kind of leadership.
Sure, yeah.
And doing people's work for them is not leadership.
No.
Right? And so those two things are kind of at odds, but they're both true.
Right, which is why it's hard, because I want to do that work sometimes, but I know it's not my place. And
Sure.
not only is it not my place, but it's counterproductive for me to get in the way of my A&Rs or to get in the way of my label manager. It's not my job, and it makes them feel not good, because I'm stepping on their toes, and it's
That's
like, well,
right.
am I doing something wrong, or?
Right. Absolutely. Okay. What movie have you seen the most in your life?
Big Daddy with Adam Sandler. That was at that time where I just had infinite free time, you know? And that movie, I just thought it was so funny. I probably saw it in the theaters. I probably saw it 5 or 6 times, and then I've seen it so many times since.
Do you think Hooters paid for that product placement?
I hope so.
I don't know. It's weird, right? Because they weren't, I don't know if they were necessarily painted in the most favorable light, but it was kind of a fun.
Yeah, it was fun. And it was like some pretty solid branding. Like it had good screen time.
Yeah. Curious about that.
Yeah.
We'll have to find out.
Yeah.
Who's your favorite DJ?
Gosh, that changes all the time.
Yeah?
Recently, I've been listening to Oliver.
Okay.
Really good. I like funky. Funky's a really good descriptive word for me.
For sure. Me too.
And I feel like that kind of transcends genres and transcends generations. Like funky's a really good descriptor for me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like Oliver now.
I should have mentioned at the beginning, you guys are a partner in this show, and I appreciate all of the support. I think a lot of our listeners come because of you guys. And, come through our SoundCloud channel and through you. And you give us new music to feature every week, which is really cool.
Yeah, man. I'm so appreciative that you guys use the music. And I've learned a lot from listening to this show. So it's an honor. Yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Well, let's do more of it. Next time we're in LA, we'll do some co-hosting.
Cool. Yeah.
Killer.
Yeah, one topic I just want to throw out there is the distinction between active listening and passive listening, and how the transition from a physical format to a streaming format has changed the active versus passive listening.
Okay. Talk about it.
So, I think this specific example is used a lot, but it's really like poignant for me, is when you buy a CD, that's an experience, right? And you take it back and you get together with your friends and you listen to that album over and over again, and you're engaged with that album.
Sure.
And it consumes you for a while you're listening to every song, and you're picking your favorite track, and you're learning the words, and the order of the songs matters, and you don't like song number 1 or 2, but you always skip to 3, and so it's a very active process, and you're very deeply engaged. And now that you can pretty much access any song at any time, and you don't have to actually have that physical thing in your hands.
Right.
Music has shifted a lot towards curation. So rather than having an album, you have like an artist or a blog or a YouTube channel or a Spotify playlist that in general has music that you like. And so it became, rather than really like meeting with your friends and listening to that new album, I feel like music has in a lot of ways shifted to, oh yeah, put on that playlist while we're cooking,
Right.
or while we're eating, or while we're partying or whatever. And it's less about really engaging with what you're listening to and having background music. Music for working, the playlists now are largely activity or mood based.
Right.
So it's like, I'm happy, so I'm listening to the happy playlist, or I'm working out, so I'm listening to the workout playlist.
Right.
And it becomes less about the songs and less about the artists and more about just the mood or the activity that you're doing. It becomes background. It becomes very passive.
So what impact does that have on both sides? On the listener and on the creator?
Which one first?
The listener.
Okay. For the listener, I think that it accomplishes a lot of different things. But some of the most important ones is I think the connection between fans and artists is much more fickle. And by that, I don't mean that there aren't like really devout fans of specific artists, but I feel like it's much more flighty and it changes much quicker.
Sure.
And when I was growing up, and I'm sure it's different for you as well, there were, as you mentioned, there are people that identify as rockers or metalheads or whatever.
Right.
There were also people that very much identified as Fish fans or Grateful, they were Deadheads or they're Bob
Absolutely.
Dylan fans. And I feel like that is much less now, where there are definitely Zed's Dead fans or Nicky Romero fans or Disclosure fans or whatever, but it's that process, the turnover is much faster. And the culture, the music culture and the show going culture is more about going to shows than going to see a specific artist. It's just like, oh, what
Right.
show can we go to this
Festivals or
week?
whatever.
And the festival, it's like a lot of times it's not even about the lineup.
Right.
It's like, who cares what the lineup
Yeah,
is?
yeah.
I like Bonnaroo or I like
sure.
Coachella. And
Yeah.
there's definitely something to that. I'm
I
not
mean-
saying that passive is worse than active. It's just very different, and it's
Right.
put music into a very different role in society.
So I like to argue that it diminishes your enjoyment of the music.
That's a tough one. I think, personally, I agree with you. I like to really actively engage with music because I feel like if I just have music playing while I'm working out, I don't really get into any of that music. It's just like keeping me going. It just sets the tone. So I do agree with you. However, what I think it accomplished positively is that a lot of people that weren't music listeners previously, like being a music listener used to be a specific type of person. A lot of people just weren't really into music, or at least more people, I feel like. And
Well, they didn't buy music.
right.
They certainly, I think people listen to the radio
Sure.
or
Yeah.
whatever, right? But they certainly didn't buy music.
Right. They weren't avid music fans.
Yeah.
And I think that is much more common now because of how easily accessible things are. And because actively engaging with music is a very specific thing,
Yeah.
and you have to be really passionate about what you're listening to want to actively engage in the way that I described with an album before. Whereas a lot of people work out, a lot of people run, a lot of people hang out with their friends, or a lot of people study.
Right.
And now there's study playlists. So even if you're not a huge music fan, maybe you're not the type of person that would have actively looked out for new music. But now, because there's a steady playlist on your Spotify, one of your friends does a steady playlist, that person now listens to a lot of music.
Yeah.
So I agree that I think on an individual level, it does diminish your enjoyment with the music. But I also think it's exposed a lot more people to music that might not have been before. So I think there's good and bad.
So what does it do on the creator side?
So this is on the creator side as well as on the record label side and
Okay.
sort of the business behind it. But the focus really was on albums and bodies of work.
Yeah.
And singles have always been very important. I don't mean to, argue against that at all. especially with radio, and the focus on singles goes back
Well,
a long time.
singles are important in the
in the
albums were
marketing
important
process.
from like the 70s to the 90s.
Right.
And before that, it was singles.
Right.
Mostly. Too.
Right. So before that, I wasn't listening to music.
No, I understand.
I wasn't
Sure.
alive. But during that period, the 70s to 90s, as you said, the albums were the format. So artists had to focus on creating bodies of work where it's
Right.
not just, oh, I want to do a tropical house song, and then I want to do a dubstep song, and then I want to do this. It's like they had to create a body of work that told a story and was meaningful as a body of work rather
Yeah.
than a collection of random songs. Granted, there were people that would just release collections of random songs, and there's
Sure.
nothing necessarily wrong with that. But there was a focus on concept albums, and you had all the cover, the art, the booklet that went in the CD case or the vinyl cover, and
True.
it was so much more of like a full piece of art on so many different ways and so many different mediums, and that's a very different thing for an artist to focus on as opposed to, okay, well right now dubstep is hot, so I'm gonna make a dubstep track, and then right now festival house is hot, so I'm gonna make that. It allows artists to be much more flighty and change what they're doing a lot more often because they don't have to spend a year or 2 years. Like the life cycle of an album could have been a long time. A lot of bands would put out an
Sure.
album and then tour for 5 years and
Yeah.
then put out another album. Now, when we even from our side, like when we're talking to artists, we like artists that can deliver us a track a month because that's a model for success. Consistency.
Yeah.
Just putting out content. You don't want to put out junk. But if you're finishing tracks,
But if you're going to make a 12-song album, you should just put out one a month.
you should put.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how. Maybe I should switch my quote from earlier to consistency.
Yeah.
Focus on consistency rather than making an album. Let's release 12 singles.
Yeah.
Because if you put out an album and then you wait a year and then you put out something else, a lot of those fans will have disappeared. They've
Right.
moved on. They care about different music now. Like trends are changing too quickly, and people's attention span is so short
Yeah.
that if you're not constantly re-engaging your fans, they've moved on. And so you can't come back and expect after a long period of time that those people will be waiting for you. So there is just a focus on rapid turnover.
So as a metal fan and a dance music fan, what is a song that you love that we would be most surprised to learn?
I love Alicia Keys.
Okay.
That's probably. I love Alicia Keys.
All right. That's pretty good.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have guessed that.
yeah. I like Ariana Grande.
Oh, I like Ariana Grande
Yeah,
too. I don't know
Dangerous
what
Woman.
I have no idea what her music sounds like,
Oh, okay.
but I love her.
Yeah. Okay, me too.
Yeah.
But I like her music too.
Oh, okay. I've never heard her music, but I love her anyway.
Yeah, I think those are good.
Okay. Nice.
I honestly have a very very open taste in music. I like
Yeah.
a lot of different stuff, and I think running a label and being involved deeply in the music industry has helped shape that in a lot of ways. Like
Sure.
anytime you listen to one thing a lot, you want to try something else, and I've just heard so many different things, and I kind of at one point I identified as one of those people that I like metal and rock but not country and
Right.
R&B and whatever.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
now it's like a good song's a good song. And I really believe that. There are some things that I like less than others, but
Yeah.
I haven't found a genre that I haven't been able to find a good song in.
I believe you. Dude, this was so much fun, man. I appreciate you telling the great stories.
Yeah, thank you.
Fun
This was
times.
great.
Awesome.
I'll let you know next time I'm back in LA, and we'll do it again.
Let's do it. So that was Ethan Baer on Rebel Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit us with a review on iTunes, some comments on Twitter, Facebook. Watch the YouTube. We got videos coming up every week now. And most importantly, come back next week for more Rebel Radio. Peace.